Hello, I'm Penny Thornton and I'm talking astrology. And this is all very different, isn't it? Normally I'm somewhere else, and also I'm over here at this part of the screen. So what's going to happen in the blank bit of the screen in front of you? Well, I'm going to be sharing it with Steve Judd, master astrologer. And Steve is a great friend. We've always known about each other, but probably in the last couple of years, we started to work a little bit more together. And finally, we thought, let's do it once and for all. Let's do a video together. We'll just turn the cameras on and we'll just talk about all the things that we find fascinating. And hopefully you're going to agree with us and find them fascinating too. So without more ado, can I please present my great friend, master astrologer, Steve Judd.
Hello, world. It's the 9th of April, 2024. It's mid-late afternoon, and I'm sat next to perhaps one of only two astrologers who I really have the utmost respect for. I've admired Penny for a long time. I hold my head up to her. She's been doing astrology longer than I have.
But that's not because I'm older than you. Which I am.
Just pretty, right? And we decided to just do this just for the hell of it and to get proper astrology out into the world. Because without wishing to pick ourselves up, we know what we're doing. We're both good astrologers and we both got a finger on the pulse in terms of the world's astrology at the moment. So we want to do something now about contemporary astrology in the 21st century, particularly in 2024. Hope you enjoy it. Where should we start?
Well, today, when this video goes up, as we have decided, being the great astrologers we are, to actually launch this on the Jupiter-Uranus conjunction of the 20th, 21st of April. This is really a monumental moment, really. Yes, this conjunction happens every 14 years or so, but it's the time that this is happening, the current time that we are living in. Eclipses, we've got all sorts of things going on in the astrology. And in a way, because Uranus is very much the planet of astrology, certainly the planet of technology and space and all those kind of rarefied things, the Jupiter-Uranus conjunction is the moment we'd like the spread of astrology to really go
It's
nuts.
an amazing signal for launching something, for beginning something new.
Absolutely.
And when you look at the mythology, I mean, Uranus is Jupiter's grandfather. Right? Saturn was Jupiter's father and Saturn was Uranus's son. And both neither Jupiter or Uranus are that sort of, so we say, sociable with Saturn. So grandfather, grandson, and they really, you know, how many people can say, I really had a good time with my granddad or my grandma? Sometimes you get on better with the grandparents than you do with the parents, you know?
Absolutely.
And I think that this Jupiter-Uranus conjunction is a wonderful opportunity to launch, initiate, begin something new in a really positive way. And that's for everyone, both individually and collectively.
Yeah, I mean, it's coming at the right time. And I think that we need to remember, as I always remind you on my own videos, that there's nothing in astrology that is ever one thing. It's not just one note. It's like a full orchestra. So any planet, any point, any aspect has a tier of meanings. So we could look at this beautiful Jupiter-Uranus conjunction and think, how fabulous is that? We're going to have a growth, a spurt in kind of consciousness or knowledge. We're going to advance. We're going to break barriers. We're going to have things happening at this time that are going to change the world in very good ways. But oh my goodness, no, we have a whole other aspect of Jupiter and Uranus together, which is very, very destructive.
It's like a giant crescendo in a symphony of multifaceted orchestral representation. It's crossing so many different dimensions that it's like a crescendo across the board. And then it's going to dissipate, but not fade away. The seed will carry on, hopefully, for the very long-term future.
Absolutely. We want to come back to this in a minute because there's something really important about this particular Jupiter-Uranus conjunction. But just to be very simple, we're working with two planetary keywords, if you want. We're working with Jupiter, which is expansion, It expands anything that it connects to, so to speak. And of course, you can have good growth and you can have inflation and you can have all sorts of escalations, things getting out of control. And with Uranus, you've got the principle of change. You've got revolution. You've got breakthroughs, breakdowns, breakups, all those 3B words, which are fabulous for astrology. So at this present time, we can see all the things going on in our world, whether you're really celebrity followers, you're going to see lots of big breakups you didn't expect. We're going to see breakthroughs in deadlock situations, and we're going to see incredible breakdowns of communication, whether that is with the internet and that kind of digital world, or whether it's parties trying to reach a solution. You're going to find a lot of people not able to, or a lot of countries really on the precipice of really splintering apart. Just quickly, before you take over for a minute, I don't want to grab the screen from you.
That's it. Right.
I put together I like things to be simple. And if you take those two words, you take Jupiter growth and you get Uranus change, very simply, change equals growth. There can be no growth without change. And the Jupiter-Uranus conjunction kind of epitomizes that.
It does indeed. And I would suggest one further word with relating to Jupiter on this, and that's amplification.
Good word.
And with Uranus bringing change, which can be both positive and challenging, sometimes both at the same time, we all live at various different times with Uranian energy through our lives because it has an 84-year orbit. You know, it affects us all at various stages in our life. But to have Jupiter on top of Uranus is going to amplify the immediacy and the urgency and the need for quite radical change. This is not advocating revolution or rebellion, but it is advocating a new approach to the future, innovation and novelty, without getting too stuck. I notice it's in Taurus, which isn't the most flexible.
It's interesting, isn't it? And you think about agriculture, don't you? You think about buildings, you think about the earth. And of course, we've got a lot of problems with the climate change, the heat, the scorching of the earth. You know, so there's a lot of things that apply to that. And every time I saw a country in Europe with the tractors blocking the city routes, I thought, oh yeah, that's it. That's Jupiter Uranus in Taurus. We want to complain about the problems that we're having with agriculture, you know.
Also, I think it's got a lot to do with the way money is used in our society as well. You know, every country in the world is in debt. Everyone owes everyone else money. And the idea of debt is something that seems to be becoming so
it's part of life.
But it's becoming redundant. You know, what would happen if all of a sudden there was no global debt?
Wow, wouldn't that be great?
Wouldn't that bring in a massive change? But then wouldn't a lot of people just go, okay, we've wiped slate clean, let's borrow lots of money again?
True.
This is about an upgrade.
Exactly.
And it's an upgrade of consciousness as much as anything else.
Yeah, and I think too, when you think about the new currency, Bitcoin, well, is it that new? It's been around for a while, but you'd think that you put these two principles together, Jupiter and Uranus, you'd get a growth in Bitcoin. I mean, a surge in it. Or is it going to go out of control and sort of blow itself up?
Maybe it's just about trade and the way we've always traded with each other. You know, it's a massive rethink for a global economy, and it's hopefully a big upgrade, which is going to stimulate us with lots of new ideas. Because without those new ideas, we're just going to end up in a state of decay and entropy.
Yeah, and it is a time of great change. And I think put together with Pluto having just gone into Aquarius, you know, we've got many, many signals that the world is you know, in a dangerous place on the one hand, but also when we think about danger and we think about, you know, no risk, no reward, it's exciting. You know, it's exciting at the same time. So coming back to the Jupiter-Uranus conjunction again, which happens on the 21st of April, but of course, as Steve said, you know, it's around and about. You can think about the whole year in a way, couldn't you?
Or at
I
least
think-
a month or two.
Yeah, you can think about the breakthroughs, the breakdowns, the breakups that happen, and they will be dotted around through the year, but especially when the sun or the moon, well, not the moon, but Mercury, the personal planets, make a connection with these two when they're close together. But if we go back to 1941, we had the Jupiter-Uranus conjunction in Taurus again. Now, why would that be? Well, of course, Uranus takes about 82, 83 years to go all the way around the sun. That's its orbit, and it goes all the way around your chart. So if you're listening to us and you're 83 years old, you're having your Uranus return, but you're having your Jupiter-Uranus return.
Mm.
And it's quite interesting that 1941, the war years, and some interesting bounces we're getting sort of right now, because the first computer was developed, it was completed by Zeus or whatever his name was, which is interesting.
And we had all this sudden forced acceleration of technology with the new aeroplane engines, with the new weapons systems. War forced us into accelerating our technology at this time.
Absolutely. And the whole thing with the atom bomb and everything was being developed. And the idea of the bounce is, of course, here in 2024, not only have we been a little bit more anxious about, nuclear, the possibility of a nuclear exchange at some point, it became pressing at a couple of points of the year. But also we had Oppenheimer literally sweep the Oscars at this year's Oscar ceremony. And that's like a little bounce. It's like a resonance if we go back. And then as you look at all the different Jupiter-Uranus conjunctions that there have been as we go through these 83 years, these things come back again. The nuclear threat, the currency, all sorts of volatility in the money markets. We've got revolutions, particularly with the most recent Jupiter-Uranus conjunction, which is in 2010, 2011. We had the Arab Spring. I mean, all the wonderful sense of cry freedom, we're going to be a democracy.
But that was at the very start of Aries. That was at the end of Pisces, start of Aries.
Yeah, exactly.
Where Saturn and Neptune will be in a couple of years' time.
Yes, and think what's going to happen there. That's another video. We'll book in another time. So should we look at this? We've got a little circle here which we'll put up on the screen right now, because we can actually sort of see the cycle. And Steve, do you want to take us around
the next Jupiter-Uranus conjunction was in the mid-50s, 54, 55 generation. And at the same time, there was a huge Neptune square to this Jupiter-Uranus conjunction. And the people born of this generation, of whom I'm one, most of them that I know, they're the people who opened the doors to a lot of other people's perception. They didn't necessarily go through those doors, but they opened the doors. And I think this was a time where, for the first time, we actually opened up the ideas of the imagination. It's a time where rock and roll was starting properly, where colour movies were really getting out to the world. It was a time where we were able to much more engage with the imagination at a creative level.
Absolutely. If we come now to the one after that, which was 1969, I mean, could this be anything other than astrology talking to us? The gods of astrology saying, you don't believe us? Have a look at this. Man first walked on the moon. One small step for man, one giant step for mankind, on the exact Jupiter-Uranus conjunction in Libra on the 20th of July, 1969. That speaks volumes about Jupiter and Uranus.
It was also the time of around this time that Jimi Hendrix died, that the Beatles split up, and it was the end of the first wave of a whole new social experiment.
Right, that's very, very interesting. Yes, absolutely. And what about 1983? That came on the heels of the Saturn-Pluto conjunction, isn't it? So,
yeah, 1983 was also a really awesome time, because it was, with this Jupiter-Uranus conjunction in Sagittarius, it was kind of like people really beginning to question the validity of orthodox conventional religion.
Right.
And by the time Pluto passed on that degree, just 12 years later, religion was in a decline. Contemporary Orthodox religion was in decline.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. And I think another thing, this idea of a bounce or a resonance from the original Jupiter-Uranus conjunction, as it, well, Uranus doesn't go round as quickly as Jupiter, but you get these bounces. In 1983, we came really. This was a time when the Cold War was at its most icy, if you like, and we came very, very close to something very nasty.
And also, at this time, Saturn and Pluto were conjunct each other at 0 degrees, 29 Libra, 0 Scorpio.
Yeah, exactly. So, and we were under Margaret Thatcher.
And it was
82.
The miners' strike, dealing with the coal and underworld, you know.
You see the advantages of being a senior astrologer. We can actually remember these things. I actually remember Margaret Thatcher.
We've got nearly 100 years astrological experience between us, folks.
Yes, but as I said earlier, I'm just a child bride, really, so let's get into that. But it is marvelous, and I do remember that period of time and the whole, Margaret Thatcher and Britain going to war with Argentina. I mean, yes, it was a very Jupiter, Uranus, Saturn, Pluto kind of period of time.
You set a pattern there, Whenever a politician's in trouble, they go to war. It gets them out of trouble.
Yeah, it does. Gets them to think about something else. And we know someone else who did that too, didn't we?
It's still going on in this world today.
We'll talk about that. So here we go, 1997. So Steve, what was 1997?
Well, 1997, Pluto had just moved into Sagittarius. It was the birth. It wasn't the birth of the internet, but it was the emergence of the internet into contemporary society. By 1997, a lot of people were starting to get emails. Their first websites were being publicly built. The computer revolution was taking place.
Right. And also, I think with the Jupiter-Uranus conjunction, this is a different side of it. When we think about Jupiter as celebrity, as things that are, very much out onto the stage, royalty, celebrity, grandioseness, if that's such a word. In 1997, of course, we lost the Princess of Wales. So that was absolutely massive. The whole world, was aware of, everything that went,
sudden breakdown,
everything to do with that. And Dolly the sheep, I think, 1997, we cloned a sheep. I think it was 1997.
Also, that degree, the Jupiter-Uranus conjunction in early Aquarius in 1997, that early Aquarius degree is very close to both the ascendant and the moon in the horoscope of China.
Oh, yes, you are right. 3 degrees.
This is the emergence, the start of the emergence of China as a more modernistic entity.
Yes. And, going through all this, we're just kind of skimming the surface of all these resonances and the meaning of Jupiter-Uranus. It's worthy of a really interesting look historically, a book about the astrology. We don't really have time to go endlessly into this, but sort of really just to give you a little flavour of the times. And obviously, if you were born in these years and you have the Jupiter-Uranus conjunction, even if it's sort of 7 or 8 degrees, even 10 degrees apart, you could still consider Jupiter and Uranus of talking to each other, then this is going to be a very important year for you as well, because you're getting a bounce, and wherever that Jupiter-Uranus conjunction is in your chart, the house it's in, the connections it's making, perhaps to the personal planets, it's going to bring out a lot of that potential that you were born with. And whether you want to think of that in a very matter-of-fact way, psychological way, these are your talents, these are your gifts. Now, you have an opportunity to express them. But also, it's almost like destiny. You were born with this conjunction, which is a very powerful, it's almost like a genius conjunction, isn't it? The conjunction of genius in some ways.
It's not abnormal, it's different.
It's different, it's extraordinary.
And bear in mind, 1 in 100, 1 in 150 people are going to be born with this in their charts, in their natal charts. So, I mean, even allowing a tight orb of, say, no more than 5 degrees is still going to be many, many hundreds of thousands of people born with this in their charts.
Exactly. And this year, and certainly around this particular time that this is coming to you with the Jupiter-Uranus conjunction, the things that are happening to you are not accidental. They're part of that life story that you're going through. But the purpose of it is, remember those 2 words, no growth without change, the idea that whatever changes radically in your life at this point is going to, the seeds of growth, that's what it's all about.
And just to throw a fishing line into the future here, imagine what the children being born this year under this conjunction are going to be like by 25, 30 years' time.
Wow, and that's a whole other conversation.
The technology by then, well...
Exactly. So this brings us on to our sort of next little list of things. Is there anybody that we know has this Jupiter-Uranus conjunction in their charts? And yes, we do, don't you?
It happens.
Do you want to start us off?
Do you know what? I'll let you start us off on this one, because you've done, I can be quite spontaneous. You've done more research.
Is this an excuse, Steve?
Yes.
But then I'm suffering from memory problems. I'm not. No, I'm kidding. I'm just kidding. So, yeah, King Charles, the Jupiter-Uranus conjunction at 2150, 2149, it depends what your astrology system tells you, that is exactly opposite King Charles's sun. So we absolutely know that this period of the year and on and off during the year, when it gets a bounce from the personal planets or other things that are going on, this is going to be a year like no other for King Charles. Well, obviously we know what began this. We know his cancer diagnosis, and he seems to be doing really well with his cancer diagnosis, and there are plans for him and Camilla to go off to Australia, in the weeks to come. So it does seem as though it's almost business as usual, and the good side of Jupiter-Uranus, we've got a new way of presenting ourselves as the king. We're not out in public all the time, but, there are differences that are apparent in the way King Charles, as it were, are going to be king, so to speak. So we have that idea, change and growth with King Charles, but we've also got to consider all the members of the royal family, the senior royal family. I'm not going to go through them all because it would take us all day. Everybody has something between about 19 degrees of the fixed signs, that's Taurus, Scorpio, Leo, Aquarius, and about 26 of the fixed signs. So this Jupiter-Uranus conjunction is going to ricochet through all the royal family. And what does Jupiter-Uranus mean? It means change and revolution.
And in addition to what you just said, please remember also that Pluto is squaring Charles's moon.
Absolutely.
And that will continue until the end of this year. And that is more of a cause to concern for me about his long-term, not so much his long-term health, but his long-term plans.
Exactly. And I mean, we could both of us take a bit of a leap of faith here. And remember, I don't consider myself psychic, and I don't think you consider yourself psychic. We're good astrologers. We consult, our maps, and we make deductions based on that. So it would seem to be possible that with various things to come in the way of understandings, announcements, decisions made by the royal family, that we are going to see a bit of a change of God. And how that comes about could be a variety of ways. It may be that the younger generation, being William and Catherine, will, take over the reins of the monarchy, so to speak, while maybe Charles takes a bit of a back seat, or whether circumstances actually dictate what has to happen, as opposed to the monarchy itself taking the situation in hand and making some good, sensible decisions. But I certainly think we are going to see something about the plans for the future of the monarchy in regard to a change of guard.
It's going to be accelerated, isn't it?
Yeah, and probably this year. Yes. And the other interesting thing is we look, because of the Pluto factor as well. Remember, it's not ever just one thing. And by the way, on the day that Jupiter-Uranus are conjunct, this day, as we reach out to you, so to speak, the sun is squaring Pluto. So we've got a Pluto bounce as well. So all the royal family, again, we've got that 0 degrees of Scorpio, 0 to 5 degrees of the fixed signs, Leo, Aquarius, Scorpio, Taurus. So that's being connected to by Pluto as well, which is why you've got these other really underground, big kind of monumental monarchical changes rather than, the shock of the new.
And perhaps with Pluto as well, it's also perhaps a metaphor for all the absolute nonsense around a lot of the conspiracy theories that we've been getting, because there's with Pluto, even with ill intent, there's always this potential for underground, underworld backstabbing or manipulation and coercive behavior.
Absolutely, but also secrets coming to light. You know, things that we didn't know about going back through the ages. And is there a shock to come from somebody releasing?
Yes,
Okay, he spoke. So I wanted to say Prince William, his midheaven, 0 degrees of Scorpio, it's Jupiter 0 degrees, Scorpio, and the midheaven, I can't see because I haven't got my glasses on.
The midheaven
is 1.5, 0, 38 degrees.
Yeah, 2 degrees, 2 degrees 20 of Scorpio.
So we've got Pluto squaring William's midheaven, and that's saying my role in life, and his Jupiter, it's my role in life is changing big time.
Pluto and Jupiter are brothers.
Yes, as they were with their grandfather Uranus.
Yes. So they will kind of get on, but
well, do they? I mean, this is a family. Do families get on? I don't know.
Family isn't automatically tribe isn't automatically dictated by flesh and blood.
Exactly.
It's unconditionally.
I love the word tribe. I think that's really good.
Families can bitch and fight, but
and coming back to William again, this idea that his role is really changing, and we can see that because of all the sort of things that have been happening with health, with both Princess Catherine and with King Charles. Then William has had to step up, and it's probably accelerated a process in terms of taking over the whole helm of the monarchy. This is accelerated. We feel, and if the astrology would back us up, that it's been accelerated. And although the Jupiter-Uranus conjunction is a little too distant from William's Venus and his Chiron conjunction, it's in there, isn't it? So we've got
Uranus will be on his Venus.
We've got Uranus, Venus, Jupiter. So that's in there with William. If we come to Harry, let's do the Sussexes, because they're really writing this Jupiter-Uranus.
We haven't seen the last of them.
In what way?
Well, Harry's moon is at 21 Taurus. Meghan's Pluto is at 21 Libra, and her Neptune is at 22 Sagittarius. So his moon is exactly in a finger of fate, as it's called, with her Pluto and Neptune, and the Jupiter-Uranus conjunction hitting all 3 of them is going to spark them into a different direction in life. Harry's moon is on his IC, very close to his roots, home and foundations. So his role is not yet over. He was born with a very strong trine from the sun to the moon. So he is going to be coming back in some shape or form in the future.
Yeah, I remember some time ago, Nick Campion writing when Harry was born and looking at the configuration in Harry's chart and saying, I wonder if history will repeat itself and Harry will take the prominent role. I mean, it's just an interesting kind of aside, isn't it?
If you really go back in history a long time, when both King Charleses died.
Oh, you mean Charles I, Charles II? Right.
There was a brief period where the Duke of York took over the throne.
How? Well, that obviously can't happen this time.
No, it can't.
And just in case any of you are unsure who the Duke of York is, it's Prince Andrew. Okay, so I was thinking something here that's interesting. Oh yes, basic astrology. Uranus on your IC, change of home.
Change of home and change in family circumstances.
Yes, absolutely. Just dead simple. That's all you have to say. What does this mean? Well, we don't know. We're already seeing.
Uranus is unpredictable.
Absolutely. But Jupiter is growth. So there's also expansion. There's also big change.
Meghan going to have twins?
I don't think there's any more children for Harry
No, I
and
don't.
Meghan.
No.
But I do think it's interesting that she's put together her orchard, whatever it's called. I forget what she's called it. Something orchard.
I know that over the coming 2 or 3 years, Pluto trines her moon, her Saturn, and her Jupiter.
Right.
There may be not so much rehabilitation, but there may be a sense of maturity coming up for her in a way that enables her to be seen as more responsible.
Yeah, I mean, I think the really big changes for Meghan are going to be on her current return, and we are going to have to wait to 49 years old, 50. So we're quite a way off from that. Because I think if we look at Meghan, Meghan is very typical of a certain type of American woman in the main, you know, creative, entrepreneurial, very active and energetic. And sometimes, and that's really, in a way, what happened when she joined the royal family, is that her way of being active and promoting and doing things didn't really quite jive with how things are conducted in the royal family here in old England. But what's interesting is that with this new venture of hers, which sort of takes her back to her roots, you know, the little, wasn't a blog, was it? It was a whole site. The GIF, what was it called? I can't remember. It was a short little word, and so she's gone back in a way to her roots, but also developed, and it's going to be a big thing. So reemergence, and coming back to the idea of what's going to happen at 49, 50. I hope these two can come through their difficulties, because you can't go through what these two have gone through and your marriage isn't dented by the challenges that you've had. It's bound to have been dented. So hopefully these two will come through this tunnel that they're in, because I think if they manage to stay on board the ship, they'll have some enriching and beautiful times by the time they get into their 49s, 50s. But it's a precarious time. And depending on what really happens in these next 2 to 3 years, will tell whether that marriage will, in fact, survive these influences.
I noticed that Jupiter in Harry's chart is opposite William's sun and moon, and that Pluto in Harry's chart is on top of William's Jupiter and midheaven. So these two have unfinished business.
They have. And I know that at the time we are recording this video, they are not speaking, really. It's a very, very heart-wrenching kind of rift, really. But they are closely together. This whole link with the moon and Venus, which is, of course, their mother's Venus. Diana had Venus at 25 of Taurus. And so, you know, the moon in Harry's chart, Venus in William's chart, we've got this tie, haven't we? We've got.
You know what's going to happen, don't you?
You tell me.
There'll be an informal conversation between Meghan and Catherine, and they'll go, all right, we're getting older, we're getting wiser. Let's make up and let's bang these two heads together. I
hope that happens. And I think it's also their children who are important in this, because their children need to know each other, because they are the future of the House of Windsor, or however that pans out. And so, yes, I have always seen reconciliation at some point. When, I'm not sure I'm prepared to say when, but it's most certainly
not right now.
Not right now, but it's in there at some point.
So I'm aware that we're getting a bit royal heavy.
We are. I was going to say let's move. So where do you fancy going, Sue?
Well, nations or politicians?
It's your choice.
Politicians.
Politicians, and where are we going to start?
Well, I'm just going to get my pitch in third, because I want to talk about a chart that we don't have on our fingertips at the moment. The Jupiter-Uranus conjunction is taking place at 21 degrees of Taurus. And in Britain, the British Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, was born on that day with the sun at 21 degrees of Taurus. So he must have been born around the 11th, 12th, 13th of May. And with Jupiter-Uranus on top of his sun, he is, to a large extent, being seen by a large proportion of the British public and his own political party as a lame duck. I do expect him to probably step down at the election and take a completely different course in life, not just based around making his millions, because he's already got enough. I do expect him to take a leading role in some type of charitable thing, philanthropic thing, or perhaps for something like the United Nations. But I do expect him to make a major change of course within the next 9 months.
I think I would agree with that as well. And I'm not. It would be impractical for him to resign before the election.
Yes.
And I don't think anybody within the Tory party would expect that. But I think that the government is far from a united entity. And I think there's going to be a lot of spats and upsets. And, just how well Rishi, negotiates.
Hey, my American friends, you think you got it crazy in your politics? Come here.
Yeah, and also I think I was looking at that Jupiter-Uranus conjunction, and it squares the Great Britain Saturn, and we're looking at the 1066 chart. We're not looking at the United Kingdom.
And I mean, Saturn on the Saturn's close to the midheaven, or rules the midheaven.
I think I've actually got the chart here. If we here we are, Great Britain. We have got here. Where is our Saturn?
Yeah, Saturn rules the midheaven, and the Saturn's on the midheaven.
Yes, it does. That's absolutely right. And Great Britain. Well, what was I looking at that gave us Saturn at 23, Neptune at 22? Well, I guess that's it, isn't it? Uranus conjunct Jupiter on Neptune. Well, I suppose that also says what a great giant muddle we're in.
We are in a hell of a muddle in this country. We have yet to redefine a new way forward. Britain has had the Jupiter-Uranus conjunction on its Neptune. We are still dealing with Pluto on top of our national Venus. And Neptune is approaching the UK moon, and it's going to be there for the next year or near the year. So Britain is in a state of completely redefining its national identity and its place in the world. And it's always survived and thrived, and it will, but in what way?
Yeah, and I think the other thing, I mean, this is a bit literal, but when we think about Neptune and the oceans and water and rivers, we have terrible problems in Great Britain with our water. It's contaminated. We have our water companies are all broke, and then we think about the amount of rain. This most recent March in Great Britain was the wettest March on record for I don't know how long, and so this idea of Neptune being a deluge, being very watery. Well, we see these things in this kind of tier of meaning, don't we? You think about.
Penny, I spent 25 years outside this country, and
because of the rain.
No, and everyone says, "Oh yes, Britons, yes, you like to complain about the weather, don't you?" And it's like we do.
Yeah, so we'll leave our lovely Britain, which we love dearly, but it is in a pickle.
Oh, that's
Great Britain is in a terrible pickle. And where should we go? Your choice.
Well, let's deal with that one.
USA.
The USA chart. Yeah, why not? We're using the Sydney chart, by the way. Folks.
Yeah, and this is interesting because there are a couple of charts that people like to use for the USA. But on 9/11, which was, of course, since independence, since the United States of America came about, 9/11 was its most defining moment. I mean, arguably, some might say joining World War II Pearl Harbor, which actually was on a Jupiter-Uranus conjunction. That's the Japanese bomb Pearl Harbor. America came into the war, Jupiter-Uranus conjunction, Taurus, 1941. But I'm getting away from what I wanted to say was that because of 9/11, the Saturn-Pluto opposition at the time, and remember these two giants, they're always very, very difficult planets to work with. Even in trine, they're difficult. But when they're opposed or in conjunction or square, Saturn and Pluto, they're very difficult. And I know that a lot of you have got transiting Saturn on your Pluto or transiting Pluto squaring. There's something going on with Pluto and Saturn in your chart. And how many of you have had circumstances that you never expected in your life? You've had things taken away from you that you never expected, stripped by Pluto's axe, so to speak. And so to come back to the Saturn-Pluto opposition, before I get carried away here, it was right on the ascendant-descendant axis of this chart. So I'm very happy with this. I love this USA chart, and I know you are too. So
but also coming up shortly, the Saturn-Neptune conjunction over the next 2 years is on America's IC and opposite its midheaven. So the whole nation, the whole idea of not only American identity, but the way it manifests itself both internally with homeland issues, but externally in terms of its worldview and its public image, is going to go through a massive, massive rethink and permanent change.
And I think the Civil War, the American Civil War, was the Saturn-Neptune opposition.
Well, America is dichotomized at the moment.
Yeah, so we're having, or it might have been the conjunction, I mean, working from memory, I can check it out later, but it was a Saturn-Neptune event, the Civil War, when it started, and we've now got, a similar kind of pattern here.
I noticed that when Jupiter stands still later this year, it stands still exactly on top of the American Mars.
Right.
And Mars rules Aries, which is its IC, so homeland issues. The definition of America as a nation state, it's always been, it's a collection of states, it's a union of different states. And I do notice with countries, big countries all over the world, that they're getting increasingly difficult to manage. So I do expect some type of separation.
Yeah, and I mean, we haven't really got there yet, but there's another date you and I wanted to look at, and that's August the 19th of this year, because of the configurations on that day are absolutely monumental, and they do pick up on this Mars.
Let's have a look.
Do you want to have a look? We need to go back, have a little look at Russia and Ukraine as well. And we're going to pick up really where we began. We're going to go back to our Jupiter-Uranus conjunction, remember 2149 of Taurus, because as we've already discussed, the royal family, big connection with members of the royal family. Now we're going to take it out. We're going to have a little look at Russia and Putin and Ukraine, because they also are in the sights of this Jupiter-Uranus conjunction. So just to give you a little list of these, we've got in the Russia 1991 chart, we've got Jupiter-Uranus opposing the Venus-Pluto conjunction, with Vladimir Putin, who has Pluto on the midheaven at 22 Leo, 21 Leo. The Jupiter-Uranus conjunction is squaring his midheaven and Pluto.
And his node.
And his node.
On the IC.
And we also have Ukraine's moon at 22 degrees of Aquarius. So the Jupiter-Uranus conjunction is squaring that moon. And of course, the moon also opposes a whole string of planets in Leo, Jupiter, Mercury, and Venus. So we certainly know that this Jupiter-Uranus conjunction is going to change things. But we have to say, I mean, when we think about the day itself, the day that we're coming to you, in fact, with the Sun-Pluto square and the Jupiter-Uranus conjunction and the connections it's making to these charts, Russia, Ukraine, Putin, we have to know that something is happening at this point in time. Now, we may not know what that is. We may not get some official announcement or some event that sort of says, oh, well, that's changed everything.
And to cover ourselves, we are recording this 5 or 6 days before the conjunction.
Yes.
So if anything happens in the next 5 or 6 days and we've not mentioned it, this is our get out.
Well, this is actually, we're recording on the 9th of April, which is the day after the wonderful solar eclipse we've just been through. So yes, that gives us a bit of time perspective. So we know that the Jupiter-Uranus conjunction is going to be change. We know that. We'd like to see something happen on that day. There may be something going on this day that we don't know about, but at some point we are going to see, we said fireworks, didn't we? We agreed fireworks was a good one.
Fireworks is a good way to describe it. I just had my 4th strong coffee of the day, right? So I'm just going to launch into this give me 1 minute to launch into this.
I will stay quiet for 1 minute.
You heard this here, right? Vladimir Putin has Pluto on the midheaven at 21 degrees Leo, and the node at 20 degrees Aquarius. The Jupiter-Uranus conjunction is squaring his Pluto on the midheaven and squaring his node. Pluto on the midheaven is an aspect of power, whether it is power in or power over, power filled or powerful. It seems pretty clear to me that he is coming up for some major changes, lifetime changes in his life. And the fact that Putin's Pluto on the midheaven is so strongly squared to Russia's Pluto and Venus in the Russian chart, with Pluto in the Russian chart ruling the 4th house of the home, and Venus in the Russian chart ruling the 10th house of public image and profile, it seems to me that something vast is coming up for both Russia and Pluto in the very near future that is going to change its direction for the long term. The fact that this also hits the Ukrainian moon adds another level of complexity to this, and it's pretty clear that Ukraine will be a part player in this at the time. Quite how it's all going to work out, I don't know. But if I were advising Vladimir Putin what to do in the next 2 weeks, I would certainly be saying, stay low.
Yeah, I mean, we could see a change of the guard, but there are two other things that we're probably not going to spend much time on in this video. And we've mentioned briefly the Saturn-Neptune conjunction, but the Saturn-Neptune conjunction has a lot of resonances with Russia, the development of communism. I mean, the Tsar Nicholas was stepped down and was assassinated on the Saturn-Neptune conjunction. And then when we have the Berlin Wall coming down, that was on the Saturn-Neptune conjunction.
And it went on a Saturn-Neptune opposition.
Exactly. We have these things. So we're looking at Saturn and Neptune getting closer and closer together. Technically, they're not going to be in conjunction until February the 20th, 2026. But in July of 2025, they're very close. They are within, minutes of each other. Mm. And in a way, I would suggest whether everything kicks off now with Putin and Ukraine, and there is some event, whether that's within the war itself or something that happens within Russia itself, or, we can speculate. But certainly we are now getting within that framework where Russia will change again in 2025, as it did with the death of the Tsar, as it did with the Berlin Wall and the death of the Soviet Union. We've got another one of those coming up from 2025.
And I believe, I'm not sure on this, but I believe that the Marx Engels Communist Manifesto was also written on a Saturn-Neptune conjunction.
I think it was, and I think that was even before. That was before.
Yes, that was in the late 1800s.
Yeah, that was 1800 and something.
1880, something like that.
Which is fascinating. You think they already put that manifesto together, but then actioned it in 1912, yes. On the Saturn-Neptune conjunction. So, or 1917, sorry, the October, the Bolshevik, 1970, the revolution and everything. So yes, I mean,
Russia's going to change big time.
Yes, it is, and we are going to say it kicks off from this point. However it manifests, we can't be sure. But there is a great stirring of cry freedom is another phrase I would use for the Jupiter-Uranus conjunction. And I'm thinking that the Russian people aren't of one voice in how they are being led and what they think of. So are we beginning to get to a point where there is more uprising within Russia itself and more of a leaning towards the idea that the path that they are embarked on, world power, so, heading into Europe to, annex other parts of Europe, is there a stronger movement now, or a movement getting stronger to make for those changes that could again mean radical change for Russia and the end of Putin, I imagine?
Certainly watch this space around Russia, Putin, over the coming few weeks, and then for the repercussions over the next 2 years.
Yes, it's very interesting. You know,
Fascinating.
really, yes.
Astrology in action.
Yeah, absolutely. So we should move on, and we'll move back to America again, and we think about the Jupiter-Uranus conjunction. Oh, one little word about Israel, I think.
Oh, now we're not going to spend too long on this because we don't want to get too embroiled in it. But Israel and Palestine were granted independence, and they came into being as nation states. And they were supposed to both come into being at exactly the same time. But because of various invasions of Israel by Syria, Egypt, and Jordan, Israel pronounced its independence 8 hours before they were actually supposed to come into existence, which is why the Palestinian state horoscope is very similar to that of Israel, but it's 8 hours later. The main factor here is that both of them in their birth charts, Israel and Palestine, were born with the sun at 21 degrees of Taurus, where the Jupiter-Uranus conjunction is happening. So there's going to be developments here, and it's not going to be quiet. And let's hope it's going to be a really big breakthrough.
Yeah, that B word, breakthrough. Let's focus on that because it needs a breakthrough. I mean, we as the world witness what's going on, and our hearts go out to everybody. Everybody. And it needs to stop. And will that Jupiter-Uranus conjunction facilitate that? And we get a freedom and liberation. We'll have to wait and see, because the alternative is not thinkable. Really, it's not thinkable, folks. You know,
we've had enough wars.
We have.
We're supposed to be intelligent.
I know, but I think it's within us because we have Mars within us. Mars is our fighting instinct.
Yeah, but you know, you can be confrontational and aggressive, but you can also be just projective and assertive.
Yeah, so, well, more women. More women in charge, girls. Yeah,
Mrs. Thatcher.
Maybe not Mrs. Thatcher, but anyway.
Yeah.
The rise of the feminine.
The rise of the divine feminine. Absolutely. And the more men start owning their own femininity,
absolutely, it's all part of that.
Yes.
Absolutely. And that could be a shift in consciousness, couldn't it?
That would be the single best thing ever.
It would. So where to? Do we want to go? Do we want to spend any more time on Israel? I think we've sort of said it all, haven't we, really? By the way, Netanyahu is going. With that
before the end of the year.
Yeah, well, pretty.
Speaking of divine feminine,
yes,
not. I've labelled these next two charts a few times now. I've talked about them as being dinosaurs, both in terms of their age and the fact that they are becoming increasingly extinct and irrelevant.
Yeah, I mean, gosh,
which one should we start with?
Well, we need to talk about the Jupiter-Uranus conjunction and where it hits, I think. So for Biden, we're looking at the Jupiter-Uranus conjunction opposing his Mercury.
Which rules his seventh.
Rules his seventh house. And he's already got Uranus and Saturn there. Jupiter's going to go over that. And so that's a release, isn't it? So that's an end. That's an ending of some description.
He's in trouble.
He's in trouble. And he's got Pluto, like the King Charles.
His moon.
Yeah, it's because the moon is at 0 degrees of Taurus. We can imagine that actually Biden and King Charles would get on very well.
Oh, yes.
They are a double act.
Yes, very much so.
They would really respect each other. And
like those two old guys in the Muppets.
Yes, moving swiftly on. So yes, Joe Biden is definitely up against it. And the Jupiter-Uranus conjunction, we could say, if we look at his Mercury, we could say, is that a change in thinking? This is a massive mindset change.
When I see Uranus opposite someone's Mercury, I tell them, look, your mind is going to change. You're either going to change your mind or your mind is going to change. And it's not what you think that's going to change, it's what you think with. So it's not the software, it's the hardware. So it's not the words that change, but it's the opinions, the ideas, the philosophies, the beliefs. So I see him as coming up for a massive reset at a mental level, which because of his age could be actually a breakthrough or quite easily be a breakdown.
We'll have to wait and see. And, obviously we don't want to make comments here, because these are real people, real lives, which is why we're giving plenty of room to fill in the blanks, so to speak, as life takes over from the astrology, as it were.
But also Uranus will oppose his Sun and his Venus over the next 2 years.
Yes, it will. When it gets very, very close there, it opposes Uranus, the Sun, pretty well this year as well.
Yes.
And I think both of us feel. We'll get to that a bit later. So we should also look at Donald Trump, and the Jupiter-Uranus conjunction for him is on his midheaven. It's a little wide. It's 2 or 3 degrees, but I would say it's
also exactly in conjunct.
Yes, it's in conjunct his moon, and so I mean, the only way if Donald Trump was a client of mine, and I didn't know anything about his history or about who he was, and I was just introduced to Donald Trump as I was going to say Joe Smith, I would look at that Jupiter-Uranus conjunction on his midheaven and say, guess what? There's going to be a change in job. There's a huge role change for you. Whatever you are doing right now is not going to be what you're going to be doing in the wake of this, once Jupiter and Uranus have done their work. And remember, we're not talking about just April the 20th and 21st. We're talking about through the year when we get these bounces towards that. So my personal feeling is that, I wouldn't want to bet money on Donald Trump making it to the election or being elected. Well, I certainly think he won't be elected. That's something I've felt for a very long time. There is not going to be a second presidency for Mr. Trump. And this is not something I don't want or I want. I'm unbiased here as I talk. I'm just stating what I believe. But this Jupiter-Uranus, and remember, right now, April the 15th, Mr. Trump is going to be in court, the first president in US history to be in a criminal court. Something is going to happen with this case, whether he is found innocent or he's found guilty, whatever it is. He's the first president to be tried by a jury of 12 ordinary men and women. So this is historical. This, I believe, could well knock him off his perch, whatever the ultimate result of that is. So my reading of this Jupiter-Uranus conjunction is just that. That's the end of,
the Jupiter-Uranus conjunction will actually knock him because of that trial date, but the immediate aftermath of this as well. Because by the time we're into mid-late May, Uranus is then spending 9-10 months conjunct his midheaven. And by the time we're into July, August, Uranus is going to be spending a year squaring his Mars. So, one way or another, there's some very, very big, probably quite challenging and even disruptive challenges coming up for him, which if he is flexible and adaptable, he can make work for himself and turn them into a whole new reinvention. And if he's intransigent and inflexible, it could be like the house of cards coming tumbling down.
Yes, it could. I like that interpretation. And I felt recently with all the court cases and all the delays and the changes and the Supreme Court saying, oh, we'll think about whether you're immune, Mr. Trump. It's almost like he's a kind of Houdini. He's certainly,
Oh, he's Teflon coat.
It's amazing. So you can't really ever say anything about Mr. Trump because he will defy you by bouncing back, doing something else, coming up with something that he needs at the time that he needs it. But reading through the lines, really, I think, this is too much for one person. And you think about, his age, and you think, how does a guy this age withstand this pressure? He's in court, he's with his attorneys, he's dealing with a campaign, he's speaking at rallies, he's doing fundraising. This is exhausting. This is utterly exhausting. So how well will he stand up health-wise to what's going on here?
And this brings us then onwards to the final 2 charts we want to look at before we start, because we do need to summarise everything we've said as well.
Do we? I'm not sure I can. This has been such a long journey.
Oh, well, just 2 or 3 minutes to summarise it, I'm sure.
I was going to say, let's have a pit stop. No, let's go on. Yes, this chart we are going to have a look at. And in fact, we'll probably put this one up on the screen as well, because it's so interesting.
I think you should talk about this a bit more than me, because you've studied this chart far more than me.
Yes, it's very interesting. I mean, I think
what is it? It's the full moon.
Yes, but let me give a little presage to this first of all, and why sometimes critics of astrology say, why didn't you pick that out? Why didn't you see that coming? Well, apart from the fact we don't see events, but certainly when we start picking around and finding particular conjunctions or configurations, this demands a lot of work. You have to keep abreast of everything that's happening. And of course, when you're working in a year, like for instance I am, like Steve would as well, with clients, then we come across these parts that we wouldn't have normally looked at. I mean, August is the great holiday month in the Northern Hemisphere. Nothing ever happens in August, but I promise you this August, there is going to be plenty happening. And on August the 19th, and I'm just going to, we'll try to get the chart on the screen for you so that you can see it as well. But I'm going to take you through what's going on. We have a full moon, 27 Aquarius, the sun 27 Leo, and that full moon is exactly, and I mean exactly, squaring Uranus. But that's not all. We have Venus in Virgo opposing Saturn, squaring Jupiter.
And Mars.
And Mars. Mars is in there as well. So we've got two massive T-squares happening at the same time. And this is really pressure. It is about unexpected developments, things getting wildly out of control. But also in there, there is a sense of things never being the same thereafter. And it's the Saturn, we've got Saturn squaring Jupiter, and any kind of big Jupiter-Saturn connection. And, when we think about the Jupiter-Saturn conjunctions, when the American elections are held on a Jupiter-Saturn conjunction, there are all sorts of things that come from that. We associate all sorts of very important for that particular presidency. It marks, it has a particular mark in it. I'm not going to get into that right now, but we have but we have this Jupiter-Saturn conjunction. So we're looking at law, we're looking at justice, we're looking at the economy, we're looking at boundaries, we're looking at all sorts of things constitutional around this particular time. And put together with, well, Uranus intersecting the full moon, we've got the idea that there is a complete change of view at this point. Everything that leads up to this and around this time is the way we thought it would happen. This changes everything. Now it's all going to be different. We can only speculate what this might be. It's the Democratic Convention that week. Now, there are some calls right here at this time. Remember, we're talking about April the 9th. We're recording this, that there is some problem with having any changes that are going to be implemented. The date of that, the convention is too late to make for any changes. They can't do that. So there is a cry for it to be brought forward. And maybe that will happen. But if it hasn't been brought forward and the convention is at that particular point, there are going to be shock and awe and upsets and all sorts of changes happening within the democratic movement. But that will spill over into the political arena generally. So I'm going to let you have a go here, because
particularly the way it affects Trump and some Biden's charts as well.
Absolutely.
I mean, the full moon, it's a exact T-square with Uranus, and that's making a grand cross with Biden's sun.
Right.
It's also that Sun-Uranus moon T-square, precise T-square, is very, very strongly connected to Donald Trump's Mars on his ascendant.
Absolutely. And that's a dangerous thing.
Oh,
that's a very dangerous thing. And Saturn is on Biden's, I see. I think
there are a number of people out there in the world who have already stated this, so we're not breaking new ground here. But there is a school of thought out there in the world that neither of these two gentlemen will contest the election. And from my personal astrological perspective, I think there's a good 40, even 50% chance that this is the case.
Yeah, I would absolutely agree with you as well. But the circumstances of why and how it comes about, we cannot possibly
I'm not even going to go
speculate.
there. No.
But these charts don't, these dates don't, well, I was going to say happen by accident.
No.
I mean, this is one of the beautiful things about astrology and the geometry of astrology, how these things come together and form their alignments. And we know they're going to have a great bearing on the countries and the leaders of those countries. That, keep your eyes on this period, because it's going to change our preconceptions about
August 19th,
how elections, America, all sorts of things. And we actually bothered to set up a chart for the election as well. So I'm going to let you have a look at this first.
We set a chart for 7 a.m. EST on the 5th of November 2024, which is the date that the polls open in the American election. And at that moment, it's a void moon. Although the moon is strongly square Neptune, but it is void. And that straight away tells me that there'll be no certain outcome from this. But much more significantly, in that horoscope of the American election, at the moment the polls open, there is pretty much an intercepted but less than 1 degree opposition from Mars at 0 degrees of Leo to Pluto at 29 degrees of Capricorn. And this is only 2/3 of 1 degree away from being precise. And this is fireworks times 10. There's going to be some very sudden, possibly radical and unexpected circumstances around the American election, which are going to make it an election day like no other in history.
Exactly. And because we cannot be sure that Biden and Trump will be the candidates for the presidency at that time, we can't be absolutely sure. But if perhaps Biden is running, then that Mars is squaring his moon at 0 degrees of Taurus. So the Pluto is, and also the sun at 13 degrees of Scorpio is on his Mars. So I have to say, folks, this is, any chance that this is going to be a seamless kind of,
movement forward.
Yeah, no. Movement forward, not at all. It is going to rewrite the history books on so many ways. And perhaps a little nearer the time, it might be interesting to take another look at this, perhaps after August the 19th, and we can reflect back and think, this is what was going on around August the 19th, and now we can look at this election coming up with perhaps a perspective in mind.
So what we've actually done, I can't speak for Penny, but I'm getting really tired. we put a lot of energy into this, as you can tell. But I do think we should try and summarise it in just 1 or 2 minutes, if we possibly can.
We should, and I agree with you. It's quite a lot when when you're doing astrology, you are using your mind. Your brain is like on fire.
Pattern recognition times 10.
Yeah, and then you've got to communicate it in a way that you hope everyone else is going to enjoy it and understand it. So yes, I think it's time to wind it up. So
for me, it's like there's 3 separate points here. There's the immediate Jupiter-Uranus conjunction with the connection to both the British royal family and the Israel-Gaza conflict, and particularly the state of Russia, Putin, and the Ukraine. And that's immediate. There is the full moon in August, which is much more significant for the American election and the fortunes of the 2 prime candidates. And then there's the actual election itself. And it does seem that after April, when I suspect that by perhaps June, we're going to see a lot more clarity around the Middle East conflict, the Russia conflict. Then I suspect the attention will gravitate more and more towards the America thing. And it'll be interesting then to look back on the eclipse of yesterday
Absolutely, that will play into it as well. We've got another couple of eclipses coming up, and we're not going to cover that now. I think another thing that's interesting, if we go right back to the beginning, and we had a look at the Jupiter-Uranus conjunctions and its connection with space, man walking on the moon. We have got this year, for the first time since 1969, we've got new, return visits to the moon. Yeah. So there's a lot of exciting stuff in this as well, folks. And I think whether it's the entertainment business, we're looking at film and television. There's some marvelous television programs that are going to excite us. We've got the Olympics. We haven't even talked about the Olympics. What records are going to be broken at this Olympics? Well, we'll have to get there and see. And not without controversy, this Olympics. We didn't include it in our talk, but then
the world is changing at an exponential and accelerated rate. And you either dance with it and you bend and flow with it, or you become rigid, in which case things can get difficult.
Yeah, for all of us. And I often think sometimes when we talk about these, the astrology and what it's doing in the terms of the world and humanity, we sort of sometimes think, well, what can I do about this? Well, hello, what can I do? Lots. We have our own little world, don't we? The world of our lives and our family and our friends. And if we know all these fireworks are going on and that there is great deep change, things coming out that have been buried for years, and it's very uncomfortable, whether it's the economy, whether it's how we live, whether it's our career, whether it's whatever it is, if we can manage to deal with our circumstances as they happen, try to get an evolved view about it, try not to make things worse by pointing the finger of blame or throwing our hands up and saying there's no solution to this. There is always a solution, folks. That take it from experience, that you think you don't know what to do, but then when it happens, guess what? You think of a solution. So there's lots of material here for all of us that's exciting and will definitely aid our growth and our awareness and the enjoyment of our lives, how lucky we are to be alive at this time. But at the same time, there are shocks, surprises, things that we can't fix. We can't put them back together because they're broken.
So dance with it.
Yeah, absolutely.
And from a final point of view, from my perspective, I've always wanted astrology to be taught in schools, right? And now it's being taught everywhere on the internet. If you are watching this and you've got at least a passing interest in astrology, so go out there and learn a bit more and educate your kids. Because if astrology were out there bigger than it already is, within a couple of generations, we'd see an end to warfare, misogyny, racism. Astrology is one of the last best hopes for humanity. It's about consciousness expansion and accelerating our personal and collective growth. So get into it. What have you got to lose? What have you got to lose?
Absolutely. So, I've so enjoyed this.
We rock. Okay, this has been brilliant. We went into this without any practice, no planning. We just did it spontaneously, no rehearsals. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Steve, too. Yes, it's great. Because it's a bit of a lonely kind of role being an astrologer. You're so often alone or with a client maybe. Mm-hmm. But to actually join forces, to be able to share the love, the passion that we have for astrology and to give it out to you. It's a joy, it's a privilege, it's just everything.
And I do think also, without naming names, we all both need to say thank you to our backup crews.
We do, yes, we have great backup here.
We do. We're not going to go any further than that.
No, okay.
But you know who you are. Thank you.
All right. Okay, so I guess it's
goodbye.
Goodbye from me. Goodbye.
Catch you later, world. Bye now.
Bye.